Eagles just got rocked by the Bucks, and I think the only way I think to start, I think winners, losers, wild card weekend. I think the biggest winner of the weekend to me, haters. Haters.
They're just having the best time.
I mean, people hate the Cowboys, people hate the Eagles, which includes Philly fans. No one hates the Philadelphia sports teams more than Philadelphia fans. Like, nobody. And so, like, everybody, like, what an incredible weekend. Like, honestly, I didn't think this was possible to ask, but it has to be asked. What was worse, the Cowboys collapse or the Eagles? Because the Cowboys seems obvious, but I don't want to gloss over how disgusting. The Eagles quit halfway through a playoff game.
Yeah, but the Eagles, here's my take. The Eagles collapse has been happening in front of our faces for 2 months.
I completely agree. What did you think was going to happen? They were like 2.5 point favorites against the Bucks. They were trying to tell us.
Do not eat. Yeah. I don't know what I was expecting.
They lost 5-6. They just lost to the Giants. Like, what do we think was going to happen?
I picked the Bucks, and I felt a little sheepish about it. I'm like, yeah. The Eagles look like the worst team in the NFL. What are we doing here?
I took the second this line came out, I bet the Bucks plus 2.5. I was like, Jalen Hurts' finger was bent 90 degrees. I'm like, I'm taking Tampa Bay.
A good rule of thumb is like there are a lot of people that kind of sit on the sidelines to criticize. Like a lot of coaches and GMs don't like to criticize teams. And every now and then there's a team that's so disgusting that everyone can't help themselves. And people who don't even tweet that much, like Jay Gruden is out here being like, I am so sorry to any quarterback I ever worked with. And like Peyton Manning, who frankly is the only honest person in sports media who like played football because he visibly can't hide his disgust when he's just sitting there like watching like the Eagles unprepared for the Buccaneers are like the most blitz happy team in the league right after playing the Giants, the other most blitz happy team in the league like 2 weeks ago. And they just are completely unprepared for blitzes. And Peyton, I'm making a thumb. We're on this like video chat thing, and I'm making a thumb, and now there's like bubbles coming up. Sorry, DK. Whatever.
No,
my point was like,
I liked it.
No, you didn't.
Sure, I did.
Whatever. The point is like the Eagles. Craig, I think that the best analysis of the entire season from anybody in the world was you being like, the Eagles Super Bowl hangover was like when you wake up drunk thinking you're not hungover, but actually
like, I feel great. I'm not hungover. I had
Awesome.
17 beers last night. I feel wonderful. It's 8 a.m.
Let's party.
Let's run it back. And then it's 3 p.m. and you're struggling to get off the couch. Your vision's blurred. And you're like, what happened to me?
My head is
I have
pounding.
aged 20 years.
I was going to say, we did the fantasy, we did the rewatchables for the season a couple weeks ago. We said, what's aged the worst? And I said, Brandon Staley. Jason Kelce looks like he aged 10 years. Jason Kelce has 10 times more gray hair. Like he looks like a guy who's been crushed at the bottom of the tush push for nothing over the last
Did
two
he
seasons.
announce he was retiring, or is he not said yet?
I think his face said everything. I think that guy
he was getting emotional. Yeah.
But just to get, we'll see. I mean, we're recording this right after the game ended. We'll see. But frankly, it's, 2 years ago, the Bucks got crushed. Sorry, the Bucks crushed the Eagles. I think it was 31-15, and it wasn't that close. And it was like a game that spawned the Eagles being like, should we even go with Jalen Hurts? And the Eagles wanted to trade for Russell Wilson. They wanted to sign Allen Robinson. Couldn't do that. They're like, fine, we'll extend Hurts, trade for A.J. Brown, make the Super Bowl. 2 years later, it's 32-9. It's actually, the Eagles are in a worse spot now than they were 2 years ago to the Bucks. But then you got Dallas losing 48-30. The Cowboys was even worse.
Yeah, I saw some people tweeting like this is worse than Dallas, and I don't think it is for all the reasons DK mapped out. Like we saw this coming with Philadelphia. Dallas finished the year looking great. They won the NFC East. They were the number 2 seed in the NFC. Like that team was humming, and they were over touchdown favorites like at home against a team that snuck into the playoffs.
The 7th seed. The 7th seed has never lost in this format. Or sorry, the 7th seed's never won in this format.
So just a quick summary with the Cowboys. Dallas, so again, they were down 32 in the fourth quarter. Dallas allowed the most points in a playoff game in team history. Green Bay had 20 points before CeeDee Lamb had 1 catch.
It's really 41 because Dak threw a pick 6. A defense allowed 41. For all the people at home yelling at us for saying 48.
That's fair.
Yeah. Just
either one. It was bad.
For the stat heads out there.
Speaking of stat heads, Dak Prescott having 400 passing yards. It's like the Ron DeSantis, like waiting till like the night before the caucuses to like criticize Trump. It's like, thanks, Dak, for your 400 yards, 20 minutes left in the game. Green Bay went up 27-0. And at that point, the Packers had more interception return yards than Dak Prescott had passing yards to his own team. which I find completely like literally the Packers defense had more yards than the Cowboys offense catching.
You guys know that the Packers have as many wins at AT&T Stadium as the Cowboys
in the playoffs?
In the playoffs. The Packers have as many wins in Jerry World as the Cowboys do in the playoffs.
Because they beat the Steelers there in the Super Bowl. That's so bad. They're undefeated there. Also, the Cowboys were undefeated at 16-0 at home, and then they're the only team to lose at home this weekend. I don't even know where to start. The Dak CD, something's off. I mean, obviously the Cowboys got their asses kicked. Two things I think stand out to me. Well, three, but two plays. One, the play that ended the game, Luke Musgrave had this touchdown. I don't think outside of like a trick play, I think Luke Musgrave is the most open player I've ever seen on a football field.
Yeah,
like not high school, college, anything.
He fielded the pass like he was catching a fly ball. Can O'Corn.
It reminded me.
It was like he
Boise
caught
State?
it. Like, his hands looked weird. He's like, I've never caught a football like this in my life.
It reminded me of Boise State when they were blue and they would hide blue players in the end zone and then like on a kick return throw it to the other guy. Like, I don't know how you get so many players on one side and then one guy on the other. And then the other one was that it's so weird that Dak and CeeDee Lamb were so frustrated by like the second drive of the game.
I don't know what was going on. CeeDee Lamb was pissed like immediately. And I don't really know what happened. Yeah, it was like the first incomplete pass. CeeDee Lamb's like, fuck this guy. And I was like, dude, you just had the best season a Cowboys ever had at wide receiver. Why did this all crumble like immediately to start this game?
It was wild. It was like that 3rd and 8 on the first drive, 4 inches off CeeDee's hands. And if he hits that, I'm like, do they just roll and win the game? Like the whole thing, it was so weird. But the other thing that I want to just note, because Dak, also, how funny was Dak being like, look, if people are going to criticize Mike McCarthy and ask if he's going to come back, you got to ask if I'm going to come back. And everyone's like, all right.
Okay.
Cool.
Are you coming back?
Yeah. It's like, all right, you're done too. But I think the Cowboys thing that sticks to me the most was, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but every time the clock stopped in the first half, the Packers just destroyed Dallas. Like the Packers, I'm counting timeouts, but also like TV timeouts, like the 2-minute warning, the first quarter break. Whenever there was like a moment, Matt LaFleur, the Packers head coach, got to think for 2 seconds.
Talk to his players. Yeah.
The Romeo Doubs got a catch, 15-yard catch to the 1-yard line, and then Aaron Jones scored next play. The Dontavian Wicks touchdown was out of a timeout. The pick 6 to CeeDee Lamb was out of a timeout. And then the 39-yard throw to Dobbs was also out of a TV timeout. So it's like out of a timeout, 2 touchdowns, another play that set up a touchdown, and a 39-yard pass. It's like every time the clock stopped, Green Bay was like, all right, we know exactly what to do. That's a huge problem.
That makes me feel really good. You know why, Heifetz? Because Dan Quinn is interviewing with the Seahawks this week.
The Cowboys
for the head
defensive
coach.
coordinator.
That's great.
Could you imagine like a worse possible job interview than like on public national television, just giving up 41 points?
And it was like, they didn't even do anything that they hadn't normally been doing. Like this was like the Packers sort of MO, the way that they did it. Like they ran the ball, did play action, and these guys were just wide freaking open. Like Jordan Love was almost perfect on play action. So
Serious question. What's worse? The Cowboys being so schematically unprepared that they have tight ends 30 yards away, just completely uncovered, or the Eagles just not being able to tackle anybody or not understanding they're going to get blitzed. Like, I actually don't know what's worse. Because
so many people were complaining about the blitz thing. I saw Kurt Warner was bitching about it. Like, why do you not know how to like deal with a blitz? Jay Gruden's out there.
Dude, Peyton Manning, he's like, they're in empty. Like, there's no running back to block. They're like, hey, they're sending people to hit you. Maybe have someone protect Hurts. And they're like, no.
So poor Solak, he was losing his fucking mind the whole game.
Do you guys think Nick Sirianni is going to get fired?
I think actually Mike McCarthy is more likely to stay than Sirianni, because I think what happened. I do. I think what happened. Sirianni is like peak Office Space. What is it that you do here? Like Sirianni, the Eagles are like a baseball team. In baseball, the Yankees, honestly, Nick Sirianni's Aaron Boone, if you're a Yankees fan. The Yankees are like baseball now. The managers, the analytics-based front offices manage the day-to-day like decisions. And the head coach is like a rah-rah morale guy. What does Sirianni do? It's like Shane Steichen did the offense last year. And the Eagles front office, Harry Roseman, has controlled the 53 personnel. Like, they're doing all that stuff. Nick Sirianni's just kind of there to like take flack like today, like get in trouble.
Just there for vibes.
To mean mug the camera.
He's
Like
there for vibes.
To mean mug the camera.
Yeah, he's there to like scream at Chiefs fans when they leave a tunnel or something. And so I think that he's because like
why
Shane
do you even need a
Steichen
head coach then? To be quite honest, why can't you just have an offensive and a defensive coordinator? Answer that question. What's the difference?
Other way around. Why do they need Matt Patricia's defensive coordinator? Could the Eagles players not decide on a play before every play better than whatever Patricia? I'm not even kidding you.
Player coaches. Yeah, they.
I'm not even kidding. Matt Patricia took over the defense. They're literally the worst defense in the league since they've allowed us scoring. They allowed like 90% of the drives since he took over were scores.
It's so context is so wild because just like we were saying earlier, like if you just like if somebody just woke up from a coma and you're like explain the Eagles to me, like just look at the stats of the Eagles season, and it was like, all right, so they made the Super Bowl last year. They were like one holding penalty away from maybe winning, and this year they went 11-6 and they lost in the wild card round. And in the wild card game, they didn't have their best receiver, and their star quarterback dislocated his finger, didn't throw a football the entire week, and clearly has been injured all year with a knee injury. And if you just read that, you'd be like, okay, so like all things considered, like a perfectly normal, decent year. And in reality, every Eagles fan is in shambles. Nick Sirianni should be fired. Oh yeah, also not to mention that their offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator were pillaged and sent to other teams. So it's like
Jalen Hurts is bending his fingers back into place by himself.
I don't know. It's like all things considered, did the Eagles have a decent year?
I think that they actually had the worst. I think the actual answer to the Eagles problem.
Half a good year.
I think they had the actual worst.
It's actually a miracle they went 11-6.
Yeah.
They went 10. They started 10-1, Craig.
The big dump, literally the big dumb one was the whole thing. The whole structure came crumbling down with that big dumb.
House of Cards.
That's crazy, man. That Sirianni to literally make the Super Bowl, then go 11-6 and lose in the playoffs, and then you're fired. And I get this is why context is important, but still, just like that on paper is pretty crazy.
It isn't though. Like John Fox made the Super Bowl with the Broncos, and then he was like fired, and then the Broncos immediately wanted the Super Bowl. Like
I feel like this is one of the best examples of all time of like how much of a high wire act an NFL team is. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Bill Belichick made fucking 9
This
Super
is
Bowls.
why it's like so absurd to me when people talk about like,
but he's
Belichick
the outlier.
Not being a good coach. Like, give me a fucking break. Like, do you know how hard it is to win in the NFL? Like, I don't know. To me, this is just the perfect example of like one or two things go wrong and the whole thing just fucking collapsed. I've never seen a team with worse vibes. They had worse vibes than any team in the NFL. They had worse vibes than the Panthers.
They did.
Like their body language was worse than the Panthers.
Trey Aikman said the Eagles' body language was as if they did not want to play in this game. He said that in like the second quarter of the playoffs.
Really bad.
Like, do you guys think if you guys were on the Cowboys or the Eagles or something, let's say you were the quarterback, what would your disposition be after a loss like this? Like, would you go the Dak Prescott route where it's like, I stand by my by my head coach. If you're going to criticize him, you got to criticize me. Like, we'll be back next year. Or would you be like pissed off, despondent, like in a miserable mood guy?
What do you think, Craig?
Not an NFL quarterback.
I would probably blame it all on you guys. If we lost the podcasting championship, I'd be like, fucking Craig was just not bringing it. Heifetz kept interrupting me, whatever, something like that.
I would definitely be like, I'd go full team cancer. I'd be miserable. I would not support anybody. I'd be like, I need to go on vacation for a month before I can think about this again.
I'd be like Belichick. I'd be like, we're on to the NFL draft show. We're on to the combine.
Is that better? Is it worse if you just don't talk to the press? Like, you know how some people get really criticized if they just like refuse to talk after a game like this, like Cam Newton.
I understand that. But then when you argue like it is your literal job to speak to the press, then that gets kind of tough. But in reality,
Mike Tomlin asked like your contract just walked his tip from the press conference.
I kind of respect that. Look, I do the same thing. If I lose a game of Madden, I don't want to talk to anybody, let alone my real life job.